on. This is not gonna be another video showing you how to slather wall paint from Home Depot on a piano. No, it's not one of those. Okay? It's gonna be... yeah. Welcome back, everybody. Now, if you're new here, I hope that you're finding some really good, interesting things. I do a whole lot of different types of DIYs, you know, restorations, building my own stuff, but this is kind of cool, and because a lot of people, you know, you may have seen my grand piano restorations and things like that, but this is a very classic, you know, used to be such a household thing. You know, there were, at one point, there were over, I want to say 1,800 piano makers. Maybe just in the US, I'm not sure, but I've heard some crazy numbers. You know, the piano, I think before the TV, it was probably one of the main entertainment pieces in a house. I mean, pretty much everyone that could have one had one. And, you know, this is what a lot of people knew as a wall piano. Or, you know, as we call them these days, an upright piano. Basically, it's meaning, you know, it fits a little bit better into a space. It's not the, you know, horizontally laid out like a grand style piano that we have. And, it, you know, those range anywhere from usually 4.5 to 9 or 10 feet long. You know, someone's actually made one 20 feet long and spent some years, 3 years of his life or something. It's really cool. But, you know, grand pianos are a whole different thing. I wanted to do a nice restoration on an upright and do a YouTube video of it. And I think you guys are going to see some really cool stuff here. This one isn't just taking an old beat up piano, and as a matter of fact, this one wasn't even that old in comparison. Some of the pianos I've worked on are 100 years old or more. So this one is a 1954 and it's built by Baldwin. And you know, these pianos were great. They also had kind of a sub, I want to say like Hamilton or something. They had different names that they would put on this same model. So I think there were a lot of these. But anyway, this is one that a customer had come to me and said, hey, we'd love to have, you know, a custom upright piano done. And it just so happened that they wanted a bright pink. And I was like, okay, that's going to be pretty cool. Secretly, I've been wanting to do a pink piano for a while, just because I thought it would look amazing. And this one's nothing short of that. It's super cool. So let's get into it. I'll show you guys what I had to do. It came to me in absolutely horrible condition. You know, half the thing was unplayable. The key balance felts were all pretty much gone, at least in half of it. I'll show you. It was something else. Let's do it. Man, the treasures you find in these old pianos. Look at that dirt dauber nest. I had to take 3 keys out to get to it. Wow, look at that. It's like, oh, there we go. Now, as you're gonna see, this one was in pretty bad condition when I got it. I knew pretty quick that I was just going to remove the first layer of the wood veneer on the big sides and you know, a few other places. I feel like you can get away with that if you're not really getting into the structure of the piano. Now, maybe to some degree that outer layer of veneer might add some strength, but for the most part, it's decorative. And, you know, I decided to peel all that off. The priming and the painting, it's going to basically make the same, almost the same thickness, so you know, we'll just kind of go with it. Now, for the most part, if it's savable, I want to save it because I can either take the veneer up a little bit if it's not all tore up. I can clean under it with the sandpaper and re-glue it. You know, you get good results with that sometimes. There's just all different ways. But on the big sides and a few other places, I did just remove it because it was in such bad condition. There was no saving it. And, you know, again, the paint job and all the materials that I use will fill nicely on that layer of the structural wood. And we basically do the paint job from there.
Alright, so one thing I noticed when I looked at this piano was that the keys are not setting even. And what that tells me is that there are some felts in there that are very deteriorated and need to be replaced. So not a huge deal, but I'm going to order all brand new felts and get all these keys setting right again. It's mostly the top section, but you know, if they're needing replaced here, they probably need it all the way through. So that's one thing we're going to do to this piano.
Now, I haven't dated this piano with the serial number yet, but they always have interesting stories. This has a plaque on the side that says in loving memory of, I think, F.C. Harden. It looks like F. I can't tell the old English writing sometimes. Kind of a cool brass plaque presented by Mrs. F.C. Harden, June 1953. So, I mean, something was going on, or they were, you know, dating back the plaque if it wasn't. I mean, I'm pretty sure this piano's built somewhere back then, so really doesn't matter if they're antiques or classic or whatever. It all comes down to the playability and how good they sound. So this one, for being one of the older uprights, it has a really good solid sound, and it seems like it's holding tune pretty well too. So it's just got a lot of veneer damage. I mean, once it starts, it's like anything can catch it and keep doing it. Probably going to replace a little, so even when I do the paint job, it's all going to be level. But we'll see once I get into it. So as I'd mentioned a bit earlier on the sides, I didn't end up replacing veneer. I just left it off because it was very easy for me to kind of smooth out and resurface the wood that was underneath and get it ready for paint. So basically this piano has a lot of keys that are sunk down, and what that means on this case is there's some felts that are so badly deteriorated that they're pretty much gone. So you can see I've already done most of the low section of the piano, and once we get the rest of it done, those keys will sit level and then everything will play. Right now they play, just not very well. It's very low travel, whereas the rest of this, you got it working. So that's more normal. That's what we're going for. Now there's usually a bar of wood that lays underneath all the keys, and it's got the posts on it where the keys kind of pivot on. If the balance felts go out, or the balance punchings as they call them, you know, after many years, or maybe you get ants in it, you never know, some kind of bug that eats these things, if they were to go away, the key is then going to sit too low, and there's not going to be very much travel on it. So you need that balance felt to be at the proper height. Now the other thing that happens on this section is you're actually kind of regulating the height of how the keys all sit. So if you've ever seen a piano where the keys look like they kind of go at a wavy kind of pattern, it could mean that somebody came in and replaced all the balance felts, and they might have just thrown one felt in and didn't do any shims. You know, it's a really important thing to get all the key heights to sit just right. You're not only putting a piece of felt in there, but you're also going to use these really thin paper punchings. It's just basically like a paper washer, and you know, you're going to have to work with it. But what I do is, if you see me vacuuming in here, you try not to suck up all those old punchings and, you know, little paper washers, because you kind of need to know what each key had. Did it just have a felt? Did it have one or two papers? You know, was it no papers? Things like that. So this is kind of important. You want to try to, you know, get those keys to where they set all the same nice uniform height when you're looking at the piano.
Now these things are a mess, and that's why it's wise to have someone come take the keys out and clean the piano from underneath sometimes. And once the loose stuff is, oh, see, the piano works now. I can't set the vacuum on it. Once the loose stuff is picked up, you actually got to go around and wipe the wood really good, and even, you know, blow it out or vacuum it again. Kind of, I don't know, sometimes a plastic bristle brush can kind of help, but, you know, yeah, they get nasty. Alright, well here's another shot of how dirty this thing was under the keys. And I'm going to get it cleaned right up and get some new felts put on. God, these things are practically gone. Luckily a lot of the shims are still there, so I can see kind of a starting point on how to shim them to try and get them as level as possible.
You know, it's amazing what so many years of neglect will do, but man, this thing came out beautifully, like the whole key bed. You know, one point had all the keys out, I did all the felts and cleaned it up really nice, and it made a world of difference.
I'm happy to announce that I now have a playable piano. This one was pretty much unplayable whenever I got it. Now you're gonna see some keys that are a bit low and a bit high. That's where I gotta go in and adjust all the, kind of do the regulation for like the key height. But all I wanted to do right now was get it playable, and it's great. It actually sounds really good. Very cool. Of course, like any piano that hadn't been tuned in a long time, it's out of tune, but hey, all the keys are functional. That's great.
Now, this piano was kind of next in line from a piano that I was currently working on. So, once I knew that this was a done deal, you know, I wanted to make sure I could get it playable first, and then the customer was cool with, you know, waiting. But once I knew it was a done deal, that's when it was time to really take all the keys out and get this thing in the booth and get rolling with it.
You can see the difference in the area that I've cleaned and replaced felts, and it needs to be vacuumed again because some stuff has blown into it from other areas. But you see I would do all the felts, which I'm getting ready to finish it from there. Some of these I replaced to get the piano playing, but I'm doing all of them. All those white ones are going to be brand new like that. So yeah, but look at that dirt dauber nest. Amazing. Let's get that up. Jeez.
Now, one of the most tedious parts of the piano restorations for me, at least most of the ones I've had so far, is they all have some degree of wood and veneer repairs that I need to do. So if I'm not pulling the veneer off, I'm either going to be filling in a chunk that's missing from a dog that chewed part of the piano out, or maybe somebody hit it with something. You just never know. But there's a few different ways that I either glue a piece of veneer that's coming loose. I can, you know, clean in there with some sandpaper and use a really good adhesive to put it back and clamp it. Or in this case, on this piano as well, you know, there were some pieces I was able to, you know, to remove the outside of the veneer. And then there's another thing. If I have to fill in a big spot, I actually use the same aircraft grade resin that you guys have seen me use on the Vaydor build. And since you can mix it with that flocked cotton, and you know, overall that mixture is called flocks, it makes this really amazingly strong putty, and it'll hold wood together. It'll hold, I mean, it'll pretty much hold anything. Once this stuff cures, it's as hard as like hard plastic, at least. So that's one thing that I'll do. You know, sometimes I'll have to fill in these missing chunks and things like that. If it's getting a paint job, that's okay because we're working on it pretty much like a car at that point. You got to get the wood repaired. Now, if it's a piano that's going to get a wood finish, of course it's more expensive, but that's where we would really have to be replacing veneer and, you know, taking it down to whatever point it's damaged and then building it back to the original standard. So luckily, an old piano like this we wouldn't really be doing a wood finish on. You know, it's definitely was destined for a nice paint job color, and that's what it's getting. So that's what I'm kind of doing here, is going through, finding all the damaged areas, anywhere where there was delamination of the layers, gluing them back together, and fixing the bad, you know, areas that really need some attention. Now sometimes when I get the main body of the piano pretty much repaired and prepped, I like to go ahead and get that in primer because I want to get that wood covered, knowing that it's safe. Then I can also see if there were any little cracks or things that I missed in the repairs, and it kind of gives me a good outlook on what the other parts of the piano are gonna do for me, you know, like what's really gonna be involved with repairing those. Now in this case I pretty much did that. You know, I got it ready, I got primer on the main case, and you know, it came out pretty good, so that allowed me to kind of move on and then figure out which piece to go to next. Now of course, with any project like this, you're gonna take care of all the work that has to do with the structure and the solidity of the thing first. I mean, you know, any gluing, any kind of, you know, stuff that needs to be bonded back together, you know, trim work that might be missing, or in this case, the customer had seen on another listing that I had from an older piano restoration, there was a picture frame looking trim, that's what I've come to call it, and this is actually something that's pretty popular. I get asked about it a lot. I don't see it on a lot of pianos, but I had told them, I said, well, if you really like that, I can add it to this piano. So for a little bit of an extra cost, I built the picture frame trim the same way that it was on the Yamaha piano that they had seen. And I thought that was pretty cool. You know, this is just one of those things where you can be creative, you know, and with somebody like me, I like to try to, you know, take on the challenge. And, you know, even though I kind of done stuff like this before, every piano is a little bit different. This one we were a little bit more limited on the space, so I had to kind of reconfigure the measurements to get these rectangles to look just right. But overall it came out great, and it's just another thing that really set this piano apart and made it, you know, look different. Once the picture frame trim was added, that pretty much was the end of the, you know, surface changes or you know, big modifications. And it's time to get on the rest of the parts. So here we go. I pretty much go through all the other parts. I do the same thing for the lid, you know, the front faces, and then the cover that pulls over the keys. And we get all these pieces caught up to the main case so that they can all go in primer, and then we get into the paint process. Now for this particular job, we were going with automotive paint, and some of you might know that automotive paint is some of the most protective, most solid type of coating you can get out there. I mean, this stuff is meant to sit in the sun for years at a time. I mean, cheap automotive paints, you know, still last in the sun a year and a half or 2 years, you know. Some people, you've heard me rant about it before. They'll put a gallon of $150 clear coat on their car, and then they're wondering why it's peeling 2 years later. Or, you know, of course, there's the more expensive versions, like the $600 or $700 clear. They're meant to sit 10, 15, 18 years in the sun with, you know, pretty much no problems. So automotive is great stuff, and yes, you got to go through the process to make it look good, because if you paint automotive paint directly on top of wood, it's it's so thin in some ways that it's not going to fill in like wood grain. It's going to go into the wood grain, and then you're just going to see the divots. So primer for this piano, I would say a low, or really anything that's going to sit inside of a house and not be exposed to the sun. You can get away with even a cheaper version of automotive primer, you know, something that has a hardener that mixes into it. You know, anything like that is going to be a lot better than just grabbing a can of spray paint, or, you know, even something that you brush on. It's like a single component, you know, with no mixing. This primer happened to be like, you know, the $100 type of automotive primer, whereas some automotive primers hit $500 or $600 a gallon. But in this case, all you're looking for is something that's going to fill in the grain really nice. It's going to stick good and provide a good surface for the paint color to go on. And that's what we did here. So basically, going through the primer, I did 3 really heavy coats. Some of the parts of the piano needed to be done a second time. So you're sanding all the divots out, and then, you know, basically you go back and reapply 3 more heavy coats just so you get a little bit of a better surface. And you know, it's just it's a bit of a long process. You got to sand every little square centimeter and, you know, get it as thorough as you can so that the automotive paint doesn't show any little, you know, flaws and imperfections. And really, completely honest, I mean, my customers typically know we're not going for perfect pianos here. I'm not selling these pianos for $5,000 and $10,000. You know, I try to keep them, you know, within the 25, maybe for the shorter spin it pianos, and up to, you know, maybe 3,000 or 4,000. I try to really work within that market on maybe a bit of a lower budget, you know, but these pianos are typically going to be learned on. You know, they're going to be played a lot. They're not just going to sit there and look pretty. So we're going for a good finish that's going to protect the piano and keep it working for a long time, but, you know, still look great for years to come. It's like I literally put so much attention to detail into, you know, trying to sand all these little divots, you know, jamming your fingers into these little crevices to try and get everything right so that, you know, the new paint's gonna stick well. It's just a never-ending thing. And, you know, it's worth it when it's done, but lots of attention to detail just to get a paint job to look right on something like a piano, you know. It's made of wood. On the main body of the piano, I'll typically leave the paper and tape on until the primer process is finished, because any sanding that I do or repriming, it's kind of nice having that barrier there so that you're not sanding and getting all that dust into the piano. It takes, you know, an hour or two sometimes to tape this up properly, and it's just better to leave it. Now, what you do want to do is when you get ready to paint, you're going to want to retape, because you don't want things that have collected on that old paper while you were working on it, whether it's the dust or whatever. You're going to be blowing that around. I mean, the automotive paint process is already so tedious, and you've got to be so clean that you're going to want to retape and paper. Now, the other thing that goes along with that is typically you're going to tape a little differently than how, you know, you would if you'd prime. So when it comes to painting, I might be running my tape lines a little further in so that maybe some overspray can blow in certain places. Or, you know, maybe I taped for primer on purpose a certain way so that I could cut an edge. You know, the primer tape lines are very thick, so you'll do it right on an edge where you can sand that down easily, and then I might be painting to the next surface over. So there's some different things that happen, and you'll see, you know, I basically have taken all the tape and paper off as soon as the primer's done. And, you know, it's all sanded down. And then I do that final tape and prep before getting the color on. Now, I thought it was pretty cool that they were going bright pink with this piano. And I had seen this very rarely just through Google searches before. I thought it'd be really cool sometime maybe to do like a glittery pink one, like a baby grand, but I haven't had the right opportunity to do it yet. Now this one, they actually didn't want to go with the glittery. They had a sample, I think, of some type of wallpaper that was really cool. It was almost tropical looking, but it had some pinks in it. And as far as I can remember anyway, and it was really cool that they found a color very quick that was going to match. You know, we went to the paint supply store, we met there and showed them a few samples, and even though, you know, everything, any color shade is possible, they happened to have a little sample piece of, you know, one of those little plastic car looking things that they had sprayed out. And it was very easy for us to basically select the color. It was kind of a done deal, quick, and you know, we had the paint code right there. So that was cool. Now this base coat color was running right around $200 a quart. As I said, you know, automotive paint is good stuff, so it's not cheap. And, you know, it's got to be done. You definitely don't want to waste it. You got to be careful with it. Once I had some parts prepped and ready to go, I was excited to see how this color was going to look. So we got them in the booth, got everything ready and cleaned up, and got to spraying. So I have the keys kind of put off into these groups of, you know, 8 or 10, and that way it's a little, you know, easier when I'm putting them all back in. I don't just grab a big bundle of keys at once. So every key gets a little bit of a resurface. I like to clean the junk off of it, and I'm usually taking 2000 grit sandpaper and just giving a little spray just to kind of knock the top junk off. Also, you know, any light scratches or whatever come out of it, anything that might be embedded on the key, you know, solvents that may have kind of melted at some point. I mean, there should have been solvents on the key, but you never know. Some of them have little things that look like a circle, something burnt into it. So you just never know, these old pianos. So you lightly sand the back. It doesn't even take off even a thousandth of an inch. I mean, it's not altering at all. It's just super fine sandpaper and a little bit, you know, resurfacing. And then I'm going to take my buffing wheel on the die grinder. It's got a little bit of plastic repair compound on it, and I just basically buff the key real lightly. And then do the back of it the same way. And that's pretty much it. Kind of wipe the stuff off it, make sure it looks good. If I have to go back and touch it up a little, I'll do it, but you know, that's pretty much it. We're not trying to make the keys look brand new. Just get them to look, you know, a little shiny, and get all the, you know, give them a nice restored finish so that they feel nice. Also, sometimes if the discoloration is real yellow, I might sand a little bit more in some areas just to try and remove, you know, some of the yellowing, maybe even it out a bit, but for the most part, you're not going to get it. I mean, these are pretty much cream colored keys. These aren't really white, so, you know, it's going to be fine. So there we go. And once this group is done, I'll pretty much put them back in the piano and try to make sure the height regulation is you know, pretty even, and that'll do it.
You know, I've said it before, the hardest part with any project really is to actually be able to finish it. And it just takes time. You know, this is one of those points where you just kind of do everything it takes. If a key doesn't set right, you know, pull it back out, put another shim in, you know, get it. We're trying to get all the keys the same height here, or at least, you know, within a very, very small tolerance. And, you know, as you're putting them back in, that's what it takes sometimes. You got to check it, take it out, put it back in. You know, it's just like anything, it's a process, but it's so cool to finish something out like this. I mean, it's a really cool looking color. It's something I've never painted on a piano, but yet I've always thought it would look really neat. So this thing is gonna be a stunner when it's finished. Alright, of course, this is a lot easier with the pedals out, but I've cleaned, you know, in this particular case, I can kind of get my finger in there and should be able to replace it. But I've cleaned the wood from all the paint overspray and the old felt. You know, you clean up here and then you let the pedal up. And what we're doing is replacing the felt, so I've cut some felt strips that are going to go around, and the pedal won't bump against the wood like it's doing now. So we want to get rid of that, and that's one of the things that I also redo when I'm doing these.
I've got a nice little stash of progress photos here we'll just go through, and you can kind of see as it comes together. I had moved it outside also because I kind of wanted to see it in the daylight, and also I think there was something I was doing in the booth. I needed to move some things around and you know, get it out for a bit. But yeah, this color is just amazing. I don't know if I would have, again, for me, if there was a pink, it's most likely going to be like a magenta with some metallic in it, or maybe a real sparkly bright pink. But for being a solid non-metallic color, this one I thought was the perfect shade. It was super cool. Oh, another fun part, choosing the little knickknacks that go on them. Now, these crystal knobs would have been pretty cool, but it would have given it more of the Barbie feel, whereas the black knobs give it more of a modern look, and that's what the clients ended up wanting to go with. As much as the crystal knobs looked super cool with this color, the black definitely was the fitting vibe that we needed. Now, I found that it's extremely beneficial to give these pianos a pre-tuning before I even think about setting a delivery date. A lot of times, they don't come to me like a piano that gets maintained, where, you know, maybe some of the notes are just a little bit off, but for the most part, they're still in tune. No, these pianos come to me where they could be like, you know, a key down, or even two keys sometimes. Like, I'm talking, if you're playing an A on the piano, well, the whole thing might be tuned low to where the A's sound like A flats, or even worse, the A's sound like G's. So, you know, I do that pre-tuning, and what's cool is that it gives it a chance to settle with all that extra tension back on the harp like it's supposed to be. And then once I tune it at the delivery location, it's just a lot easier to get it to stay, you know, and even the tuning when I deliver it, sometimes it could have taken 4 hours to try and do it all at once. Instead, it might take me an hour and a half, you know, 2 hours if I'm really being picky, or if they have loud dogs barking or something, TV's going. All that affects the tuning and how quick that you can get it done. But I like to give them a little bit of a run through and try to get it, you know, as close as I can within a reasonable amount of time while they're still sitting in the shop. That way, they're a lot more prepared to their, you know, to get to their final destination. So now, as for me, I don't quite have the room styling for a pink piano in any of my rooms, but I'll tell you what, this thing looks amazing. And the owners, as soon as I started sending them pictures of it, they were just blown away. Like, they couldn't believe how nice it came out. And they, you know, they were so happy with it. Delivery day came, and, you know, everything worked out well. The transport went good. So I got to, you know, give it a good tuning once I got it there and got it set up in place, and overall this was just a really cool build. It was great to be able to rescue this piano and get it back to this kind of condition where it's going to be played on, hopefully for, you know, years to come. And I know their daughter was happy to get it. Apparently she'd been, you know, she'd been really anxious about it and waiting for it, so I was glad to have it done. Alright, that's gonna pretty much do it for this one. And I just like always, I hope that you guys took something from this. It was a really cool restoration, and there will definitely be more. Now, as far as what's coming up next, if you've been following the Vaydor build series, I'm actually working on it still, so don't worry. I'm getting some material and some footage. There's a few things that I'm tying up, some loose ends. So if you saw part 8, at the end I was thinking, you know, how am I going to title the next one? Because I kind of felt like, well, we built the Vaydor, the body's kind of done. But I think I'm going to go ahead and make it a part 9, just because there are some things that I'm going back realizing, okay, I'd kind of forgot to finish this or just put it aside, and you know, those kind of things. So we're going to tie up some loose ends in part 9, and I think that's how I'm going to go with it. So you guys stick around for that. Hopefully I'll have that video out shortly, because I have been actively working on the car quite a bit. So thanks again for all the love and support. We're almost at 1,000 subscribers, and I'm excited. It's crazy to think that, but it was a slow building process, but also I feel like my subscribers, I've never spammed it. You know, it's always just kind of been like people that wanted to subscribe to the channel. So thank you guys for all the continued support, and we'll see you on the next one.